Good morning, everyone. Okay, we'll continue our book reading this morning, The Toyota Way to Service Excellence by Jeffrey K. Leica and Karen Ross. Yesterday, we looked at the limitations of machine thinking. We also looked at the following characteristics of machine thinking, which is scientific work design, scientific selection, scientific training, scientific incentive pay. Today, on page 62, we'll be looking at the new age of organization as a living system. The new age of organizations as living system. He was an academic specialist in social cognition who helped me understand East versus West. Differences in machine thinking compared with system thinking. Richard Nesbert's The Geography of Thought summarizes many experiments that compare the worldview of Asians and Westerners. The upshot was that a variety of cognitive experiments indicated that Asians from a variety of countries were much more likely to see the connections between parts, and the Westerners were more likely to see only the parts. For example, one of the Nesbit's doctoral students wanted to test this thesis that Asians see the world as through a wide-angle lens, and Americans have something more like tunnel vision. He developed a simple black and white graphic of fish in a sea. Each scene had a focal fish that was larger, brighter, and faster than the other. There were also rapidly moving animals and plants, rocks, and bubbles. He asked students at Kyoto University and University of Michigan what they saw. Japanese participants tend to begin by describing the environment, such as whether it looked like a pond or the ocean. The Americans were 3 times as likely to begin detailing the focal fish. Other studies tested recall. Japanese compared with Americans were much more likely to remember specific objects if they were presented in the same context in which they originally saw them. The consistent findings: Asians saw relationship and context, and Americans saw isolated items, suggesting Asians were more naturally system thinkers. Nesbit speculated on the historical origin of these different ways of thinking. Plato and Aristotle were key actors in developing the Western worldview. Aristotle, a student of Plato, emphasized defining the world in fixed categories and looking for defined relationship between these categories. In the modern vocabulary of statistics, as taught in Six Sigma programs, Y equals to F bracket X. That is, some dependent variable, which is Y, like number of defects, can be explained as some functions of one or more independent variable X, like how well employees are trained. The reason is that if we properly measure the variables and find the right statistical relationship, then we can accurately predict what we need to change to get the desired level on the dependent variable. Of course, it takes specifically trained process improvement specialists to work this mathematical magic and find the one best way. Sounds familiar? Nesbit argues that the deterministic machine-like worldview in the Western can be traced back at least far as Greek philosophers. Greeks were independent and engaged in verbal contentions and debate in an effort to discover what people took to be the truth. They thought of themselves as the individuals with the distinctive properties, as units separated from others within the society, and in control of their own destinies. Similarly, Greek philosophy started from the individual object, person, the atom, the house, as the unit of analysis, and it dealt with the properties of the object. The world was in principle simple and knowable. All in one had to do all one had to do was to understand what an object's distinctive attributes were as to identify its relevant categories, and then apply the patent rule to the category. The Asians, on the other hand, were influenced by different sets of philosophy, such as Confucius and Buddha, along with a different set of experiences as farmers in complex growing conditions. Nesbitt summarizes this contrasting world view that resulted from different cultural influences in the Asian environment. Chinese social life was interdependent, and it was not liberty but harmony that was the watchword. Similarly, the way and not the discovery of the truth was the goal of philosophy. Thoughts that gave no guidance to action was fruitless. The world was complicated, events were interrelated, and objects and people were connected. Nisbet attributes the Asian proclivity towards the collective and their view on how the world operates, the ecology of rural living, particularly rice farming, that is so central in China and Japan. Agricultural people need to get along with one another, not necessarily to like one another, but to live together in a reasonable, harmonious fashion. Okay, this is where we'll stop for reading this morning. He said the new age of organization as a living system. Here it defined the mind, or the ways the Westerners and the Asians think. It defined the Westerners are people who have a tunnel vision, they only think in one direction, while it defined the Asians as people who, think outside the box, have different direction of thinking. And they also told us about what contributed to this way, or to their way of thinking. To the Westerners, it was due to their environment and the philosophers who were around them. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, they were the people that had a hand in developing the Western world's kind of view. Then if you go to the Asians, what influenced their philosophy, or what influenced their kind of thinking, was Confucius and Buddha, and alongside with different kind of experience, starting from their ecological factor, like their farm, they tend to work together, where they strive for one unit, as a unit, worked as a unit. They wanted a goal that would benefit everybody, not just for one person. So all these things also influenced the Asians' way of thinking. So the environmental factor affected them, their religion affected them, and their philosophy also affected them. So that's just a brief summary of what we read this morning. Thank you.